Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
And everyone joining the broadcast to our next one.
More than 120,000 people have been evacuated, coal mines shut, and crops destroyed after unseasonably heavy rainfall flooded North China's Shanxi province over the weekend.
Severe tropical storm had dangers of the islands and will bring heavy rains across some parts of Luzon.
Malacanang appealed to the United States government to investigate the death of a Filipino nurse after she was assaulted by a homeless man in New York City.
And inside a huge crater in Israel Sunday. To simulate conditions on
First in our news, more than 120,000 people have been evacuated, coal mines shut, and crops destroyed after unseasonably heavy rainfall flooded China's Shanxi province over the weekend, according to state media, with more rainfall forecasts ahead. The deluge comes just months after record floods hit the country's central Hainan province in July, killing more than 300 people, and raises fears about ensuring the supply of energy ahead of the winter. Many parts of Shanxi, a landlocked province that generally has dry weather, saw record-breaking rainfall over the past week, according to the provincial government, which ordered coal mines to take flood-proofing measures and make emergency plans to be activated immediately in case of grave danger. At least 60 coal mines in the province, one of China's top coal-producing regions, have suspended operations due to the floods, according to a local government statement, even as the country faces a power supply crunch. More than 1.75 million residents have so far been affected by the floods in Shanxi, which state news agency Xinhua reported had received more than 3 times the average monthly rainfall for October in just 5 days last week.
Hong Kong's weather forecaster has said it will issue a typhoon warning by Monday night as a second major storm in just 3 days approaches the city. According to the South China Morning Post, the Hong Kong Observatory on Monday afternoon is also expected to explain the rationale behind its warnings throughout Tropical Storm Lion Rock over the weekend, which drew criticism from the public for catching them off guard and dragging on too long. But a former assistant director of the forecasters said the decisions had been made based on the best available information. The prediction made were already as accurate as possible, but we are limited by the technology we have. I believe they are doing their best. And that, according to Leung Wing Mo, he also said it just shows humans are no match for the skies. Now, the new storm is likely to come closest to the city about 400 kilometers to the south on Wednesday morning. Leung estimated Kompasu's impact would be stronger than Lion Rock's, given its closer proximity, though the effects would be felt for a shorter time. While the weather remained sunny on Monday, the observatory said it was expected to deteriorate by the later part of Tuesday, with gale force winds and widespread thunderstorms very likely.
And more weather news, this time in the country. Severe tropical storm Maring endangers Babuyan Islands and will bring heavy rains across some parts of Luzon, according to weather forecaster or the Weather Bureau, Pag-asa. In its 5 p.m. bulletin, Pag-asa said Maring was last tracked 105 kilometers east-northeast of Apari, Cagayan, or 120 kilometers east-southeast of Calayan, Cagayan. Damaging gale to storm force winds will continue to prevail in areas under signal number 2 and signal number 1. Let's listen in.
Dahil po dyan, nakataas pa rin ang ating tropical cyclone wind signal number 2 sa Batanes, sa Cagayan, including Babuyan Islands, northern portion ng Isabela, Apayao, Kalingan, Mountain Province, Abra, Ilocos Provinces. Yun po yung mga areas na naka-shade ng yellow. Samantala, ang ating tropical cyclone wind signal number 1 ay nakataas po sa nalalabing bahagi ng Isabela, Nueva Vizcaya, Quirino, Ifugao, Benguet, La Union, Pangasinan, Aurora, Nueva Ecija, Tarlac, Zambales, Pampanga, Bulacan, northern portion ng Bataan, northern portion of Quezon, kasama po dyan yung Pulili Islands, at dyan sa Calaguas Island sa Camarines Norte. Yun po yung areas na shaded po ng color blue.
Now, flash floods and rain-induced landslides are likely, especially in areas highly susceptible to these hazards. In the next 24 hours, monsoon rains may be experienced over the Visayas, Zamboanga Peninsula, Palawan, Occidental Mindoro, and Oriental Mindoro as Maring enhances the southwest monsoon. Occasional gusts reaching strong to gale force in strength are also possible over the island, coastal, and upland localities of the Visayas, Dinagat Islands, Surigao del Norte, Agusan del Norte, Misamis Oriental and Occidental, Camiguin, Zamboanga del Norte, and the rest of Luzon. Gale warning is still in effect over the seaboards of southern Luzon and the Visayas and the western seaboard of central Luzon that is not under signal number or TCWs. Rough to high seas will be experienced over the seaboards of areas where signal number 2 and 1 have been hoisted, and the sea conditions are risky for all types of sea vessels. Moderate to rough seas will continue to prevail over the remaining seaboards of Luzon and the Visayas and the northern, eastern, and western seaboards of Mindanao. These conditions are risky for those using small seacraft.
Meanwhile, Prince Charles, a lifelong environmentalist who has championed organic gardening and runs one of his cars on white wine and cheese, has urged world leaders to turn talk into action at the upcoming UN Climate Summit. We have Aribel Celestino of our ABC UK Bureau with that story. Aribel, please tell us more.
Hi, CJ. And yes, Prince Charles, a long-life environmentalist who has championed organic gardening and runs one of his cars on white wine and cheese, has urged world leaders to turn talk into action at the upcoming UN Climate Summit. Queen Elizabeth II's eldest son and heir 72 is due to attend events at the 2-week COP26 summit in Glasgow starting on October 31. Along with his 95-year-old mother. But in an interview with the BBC broadcast on Monday, he said he worried the world leaders would just talk, adding the problem is to get action on the ground. Well, CJ, the UN summit will try to persuade major developing economies to do more to cut their carbon emissions and get the rich world to cough up billions more dollars to help poorer countries adapt to climate change. And when asked if Prime Minister Boris Johnson's UK government was doing enough itself against climate change, Charles replied he couldn't possibly comment. The Prince of Wales expressed sympathy with climate protesters who have been blocking roads in Britain for several weeks as part of a campaign to make homes more environmentally efficient. He said he totally understands the frustration as the government tries to get tough with demonstrators who have caused gridlock to rush hour traffic with sit-down protests and by gluing themselves to tarmac. But he stressed that isn't helpful to do it in a way that alienates people. He added, the difficulty is how do you direct that frustration in a way that is more constructive rather than destructive? Back to you, CJ.
Thank you for your report. Just a quick question. Since you mentioned that Prince Charles talked about turning words into actions, how has he been able to do that?
Well, CJ, Prince Charles, whose Highgrove estate in Western England has an extremely organic garden and farm, was able to outline some of his own actions to reduce carbon footprints, such as cutting down on meat and fish. In fact, in 2008, his office revealed that he converted an Aston Martin car he owns to run on biofuel made from surplus English white wine and whey from cheese manufacturing. Also, CJ, other cars in his fleet had been adapted to run on biodiesel made from used cooking oil as a way to reduce his carbon footprint. And that's it from me. Over to you, CJ.
Thank you so much for your report. Please take care over there and tell us if there are any more developments happening there on your side of the world.
Thank you so much for having me. Reporting from the United Kingdom, I'm Arabelle Celestino, and we live in interesting times.
We now go to the pandemic news. Starting here in the country, Octa Research Fellow Dr. Guido David said the country's 7-day average of new COVID cases have decreased by 29%, and Metro Manila's COVID reproduction rate is down to 0.63. Let's listen in.
Tuloy-tuloy na ang pagbaba. Ngayon, nasa 0.63 ang reproduction number sa Metro Manila at bumababa pa yan. Yung 7-day average natin sa Metro Manila ay less than 2,000 na, 1,900 plus. Ito yung last time na nakakita tayo ng less than 2,000 cases per day nung July 31 to August 6. Ibig sabihin, before tayo nag-ECQ, ibig sabihin, na-reverse na natin yung surge natin na nangyari from August to September, at ngayon parang bumalik na tayo before nag-ECQ tayo ng August 6. So yun yung magandang balita. Yung positivity rate natin nasa 12% na lang sa Metro Manila. Malapit na yan bumaba to less than 10%. Pag less than 10%, masasabi natin na medyo sapat na talaga yung testing natin na ginagawa natin. Na ma-manage natin ang cases sa Metro Manila, at ang tingin nga natin, ito na yung patapos na yung Delta variant sa Metro Manila at sa mga surrounding areas sa Calabarzon, sa Central Luzon, yung tinatawag nating end game ng Delta variant. Hindi pa tapos, hindi pa ubos yung Delta variant, pero kumukonti na sila. Nananalo na tayo against the Delta variant. Yan yung masasabi natin. Pero kailangan patuloy pa rin yung ating efforts natin para talagang magpatuloy yung tagumpay natin against the Delta variant. Kasi medyo mataas pa rin naman yung ICU utilization natin. Inaamin natin yan. Pero lahat ng ibang indicators natin ay pababa na. At ganun pa man, Yusek, dito sa Metro Manila, nananalo na tayo against the Delta variant. Pero may mga iba pang regions na nagkakaroon pa ng surge, particularly sa Region 2. At may iba pang regions na may medyo mataas pa yung cases. Pero overall, sa buong Pilipinas, ayun nga, magandang nakikita nating trend, at mag-a-average na rin tayo ng 4 digits na lang sa buong Pilipinas by this week, hopefully.
New Zealand announced Monday a sweeping no jab, no job policy for most healthcare workers and teachers to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
The second thing we are doing to strengthen our response is to make vaccination mandatory for large numbers of our health and our education workforces. This is a decision that has been made by Cabinet today. Minister Hipkins will provide more details very shortly. The reason we are stepping up our vaccination requirements is because Delta is a different and more difficult opponent. We have seen all around the world that is the case.
But we can't leave anything to chance, so that's why we're making it mandatory. It wasn't an easy decision, but we need to have the people who work with vulnerable communities who haven't been vaccinated to now take this extra step.
Doctors, nurses, and other frontline health workers must be double jabbed by December 1st while everyone working in the education sector who has contact with students must have their 2 doses by January 1st. Secondary schools will also be required to keep a register to show the vaccination status of students. The order includes home-based educators and parents volunteering at schools, but no decision has been made on whether vaccination will be mandatory in the tertiary education sector.
Meanwhile, elated Sydney-siders celebrated the end of almost 4 months of coronavirus lockdown today, putting behind them a period of blood, sweat in Australia's largest city. Sydney's more than 5 million residents were subjected to a 106-day lockdown designed to limit the march of the highly transmissible Delta variant. Let's listen in.
The first thing I'm going to do is see my parents. Actually, not see my parents. I'm going to go to Lakemba, get a Lebanese mixed plate, and then go see my parents after that.
Oh, it's wonderful. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to be in here to get the hair done. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great feeling.
Actually really looking forward to 2 weeks' time. We can get back to the office, and then I think that will feel like it's real normality. And then for me, my family's all in South Australia, so just looking forward to the South Australian border opening.
Now, from midnight, pubs, restaurants, and cafes began throwing open their doors to anyone who could prove they were vaccinated. Since June, shops, schools, salons, and offices have been closed for non-essential workers, and there have been unprecedented restrictions on personal freedom. There will still be limits on mass gatherings, and international borders and schools will not fully reopen for a few weeks yet. But otherwise, daily life is beginning to look more like normal, with crowds again gathering at bus stops and the hum of traffic growing a little louder. Despite the celebratory mood, there are lingering concerns that reopening will bring a surge in infections. The Australian Medical Association warned that reopening must be gradual. Otherwise, New South Wales may still see hospitals become completely overwhelmed despite high vaccination rates.
Malaysians react to the easing of travel curbs in the Southeast Asian nation as the government allows freer movement for people fully vaccinated against the coronavirus. The changes, which allow people to cross state borders and mean fewer restrictions on air travel, come as the vaccination rate of the country's adult population against COVID-19 hits 90%. Take a look.
I think it's about time also. I mean, we have allowed the numbers the numbers were quite high at first, so I can understand the government's apprehensiveness about people traveling. But with the numbers coming down now, and almost 90% of the adult population has been vaccinated, I think it's about time that they should allow us to actually start doing travel.
I would love to, but definitely not immediately. I would still wait for the vaccination to go up so that just not me, the people have to be safe enough. So definitely I would also love to go for tourism because it's been 2 years now, close to. I have not moved out of my house. So the frustration level is everywhere there.
Then people start getting, start lapsing in their own precaution, right? And the first thing I know is a lot of people who haven't been traveling, they'll start traveling because previously it was a boundary that we had to abide to. So now the boundary is no longer there, right? So a lot of people will definitely start traveling.
In a televised address on Sunday, Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob announced fully inoculated people can move freely within the country as well as fly overseas without special permission. But Ismail Sabri warned people to continue abiding by rules such as mask wearing to keep the virus in check. Overseas travel had only been allowed for those who got special permission by applying through an official system. While this requirement is being dropped, returning travelers will still need to undergo quarantine. The country of 32 million has recorded over 2.3 million cases and 7,000 deaths.
Meanwhile, Singapore has announced it is easing coronavirus lockdown restrictions and will allow quarantine-free travel from a number of nations. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said it was time to press on with the strategy of living with COVID-19. Take a look.
Yet, Singapore cannot stay locked down and closed off indefinitely. It would not work, and it would be very costly. Each time we tighten up, businesses are further disrupted. Workers lose jobs. Children are deprived of a proper childhood and school life. Families are separated for even longer, especially families with loved ones overseas and extended families who've not been able to come together. We should respect COVID-19, but we must not be paralyzed by fear. Let us go about our daily activities as normally as possible, taking necessary precautions and complying with SMMs. In particular, we must continue to reopen our borders safely. Companies and investors need to carry out regional and global business from Singapore. We have started vaccinated travel lanes with Germany and Brunei, and just announced another with South Korea. These pilot projects have shown it is possible for vaccinated persons to travel safely while letting in very few COVID-19 positive cases. We are implementing more such arrangements, especially with countries whose COVID situations are stable. This will keep us connected to global supply chains and help to preserve Singapore's hub status.
According to the BBC, he said the so-called vaccinated travel lanes with Germany and Brunei had been successful and would be extended to 9 other countries. Singapore had very tight restrictions in place to tackle the pandemic. COVID-19 related deaths are very low, but the lockdown has had an impact on the Southeast Asian island status as a business and aviation hub.
U.S. pharmaceutical giant Merck said Monday it has applied for emergency use authorization of its oral anti-COVID drug in the United States, a major step towards finding a simple pill to treat the disease. Merck has submitted the application for molnupiravir, which it said earlier this month was shown to reduce hospitalizations by 50%. It said it was working with regulatory agencies worldwide to submit applications for emergency use or marketing authorization in the coming months. The extraordinary impact of this pandemic demands that we move with unprecedented urgency, that according to Robert Davis, Chief Executive Officer and President of Merck, in a statement. In a late-stage clinical trial, Merck and Ridgeback evaluated data from around 770 patients, roughly half of whom received either a 5-day course of the pill while the other received a placebo. All the patients had lab-confirmed COVID-19 with symptoms that developed within 5 days of them being assigned to their respective groups. Of the patients who received molnupiravir, 7.3% were hospitalized by day 29, compared to 14.1% of those on a placebo, a relative risk reduction of around 50%. Efficacy was said to hold up against variants of concern, including Delta, and the drug had a good safety profile. Experts have said it is not a miracle cure and should complement vaccines, not replace them.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Araw-araw sa panahon ngayon, may daming tanong kailangan ng tugon. Nandito si Ali at si Papi na rin, ang smart at pretty nanay. Ang siglaban ng kwentuhan, ang sigaw ng Pinoy Nation, information, education. Ating salaopin, ipakita natin ang magsagot sa problema natin. Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo?
ninyo. Abangan! Simula October 18, Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 8 hanggang alas 10 ng umaga. Mapapanood sa Net25 TV, Facebook page, and YouTube channel. Mapapakinggan din sa DZEC 1062 at Eagle FM 95.5.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. 16 people were killed when a plane carrying parachutists crashed in central Russia on Sunday, according to the emergency ministry. The L-410 plane carrying 22 people crashed around 9:23 in the morning local time near the town of Menzelinsk in the Republic of Tatarstan, according to the ministry on its Telegram channel. Tatarstan head Rustam Minikanov, who traveled to the scene, said pilots had reported an engine failure and requested an emergency landing shortly after taking off. He said the plane tried to avoid a nearby residential area as it approached for landing, but the altitude didn't allow it. The plane hit a parked van with its wing and the aircraft turned over. All the survivors were sitting in the back of the plane. Club instructor Oleg Shiporov told TASS news agency Russian investigators have launched a criminal probe over the violation of safety rules. Monday has been declared a day of mourning in Tatarstan.
Malacanang appealed to the United States government to investigate the death of a Filipino nurse after she was assaulted by a homeless man in New York City. In his palace briefing, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said all victims of violations of the right of the life are entitled to a speedy domestic remedy. Take a look.
Victims of violation of the right to life are entitled to a speedy domestic remedy. No? So we appeal, of course, to the U.S. administration to investigate and prosecute the killer of this Filipino nurse. Assaulted pala. Oh yeah, died. No? So we call upon the U.S. government to do what is incumbent upon any state, no, where there is a killing.
In a statement on Sunday, the Philippine Consulate General in New York announced the death of Maria Ambrosio, a 58-year-old health nurse from New Jersey. It added that the death of Ambrosio is the latest among a series of violent acts committed by mentally ill individuals against members of the Filipino community in New York City since January this year. According to a police report, a homeless man identified as Jermaine Foster first grabbed the mobile phone of a 29-year-old woman along West 41st Street and Broadway and collided with a 58-year-old Ambrosio, knocking the latter down as he fled. Ambrosio was pushed, fell, and cracked her skull when her head hit the pavement. Police said the homeless man Foster took off but was arrested minutes later. Oncology nurse Maria Ambrosio should have been working at Bayonne Medical Center on Saturday night. Instead, her brother said the 58-year-old was surrounded by her family when she was taken off life support. In addition to Friday's incident, CBS local news said Foster was arrested last month after he allegedly groped a woman on the street. He was charged with forcible touching and sent to a hospital for psychiatric evaluation. As for Ambrosio, her family said she immigrated to the U.S. from the Philippines in the late 1980s and often sent money back home to her family. Meanwhile, Foster is being held and awaiting multiple charges.
In other news, Malacanang said Maria Resa's Nobel Peace Prize Award is not a slap on the government's face, as no one has ever been censored in the Philippines. Resa is the first Filipino recipient of the prestigious citation. She was also the first woman to receive this year's Nobel Peace Award. Roque congratulated Resa, noting that the award is a victory for a Filipina. Take a look.
I'm still processing. It's like still processing. It's stunning, right? I mean, like I'm shocked. This is really for all journalists around the world. That's the other part, right? We do need help on so many fronts. It is so much more difficult and dangerous to be a journalist today.
Certainly not. It is not a slap on the government. It was made by private individuals in Norway. We respect their decision, but as I said, criminal liability of Maria Ressa remains pending in our courts, and we leave it to our courts to decide on her fate. There is no slap there because as everyone knows, no one has ever been censored in the Philippines. It's a victory for a Filipina, and we're very happy for that. Kasi wala naman pong utak talangka dito sa Malacanang. But of course, it is true that there are individuals who feel that Maria Ressa still has to clear her name before our courts, as in fact, she's a convicted felon for libel, cyber libel in the Philippines, and she faces other cases in the Philippines. Now, that's for the courts to decide. Now, of course, we are also mindful of a very articulate article written by national artist F. Sionel Jose, and perhaps we should quote F. Sionel Jose, because it does not help if this comes from Malacanang. So this comes from a national artist. I've criticized Duterte, but not on press freedom. The Philippine press is alive and well, not because of Maria Ressa. No writer is in jail. There is no censorship. Duterte hasn't closed a single newspaper or radio station. The closure of ABS-CBN was made by Congress, which did not renew the ABS-CBN franchise. Sure, he influenced Congress, but the real issue against ABS-CBN, as I have pointed out, is not press freedom, but money, politics, power, and its abuse by officers who own the TV network. Sure, journalists have been killed in the Duterte regime, but just as it was in the past administrations. But those killings cannot be laid at Duterte's door. Usually, they are made by minor politicians or officials attacked by journalists. The real test for journalists was made during the Marcos dictatorship when he imposed censorship, closed on media, and jailed journalists. Let's just say Malacanang agrees with our national artist.
Tens of thousands of Poles rallied on Sunday in defense of their country's EU membership after Poland's top court last week issued a landmark ruling against the primacy of EU law. The pro-EU demonstrations were called by former EU chief Donald Tusk, now leader of the country's main opposition grouping, Civic Platform, who has warned of the prospect of a Pole exit. Take a look.
Pseudo-trybunał, grupa przebierańców przebranych w sędziowskie togi na polecenie prezesa rządzącej partii, gwałcąc polską konstytucję, postanowiła wyprowadzić naszą ojczyznę z Unii Europejskiej. Ta garstka ludzi, która nie waha się użyć każdego możliwego kłamstwa, na przykład w sprawie konstytucji. Kłamstwa, że Konstytucja Rzeczpospolitej jest w konflikcie z Unią Europejską. To jest nieprawda.
Tusk asked people to defend a European Poland after a wave of criticism against the ruling both at home and from around the European Union. Membership of the bloc remained very popular for relations in Warsaw and Brussels have become, and Justice PIS party came to power. The main bone of contention is a wide-ranging which the European Union will go independence and roll back democratic rule. The latest twist in the long-running dispute was from Poland's a body which government it's not. The ruling challenge the primacy and also
Podtrzymaliście wiarę w zwycięstwo, że miejsce Polski jest w Europie, że Europa jest tutaj, a Polska jest jednym z najważniejszych członków wielkiej wspólnoty Zachodu.
by hearing with Poland.
Ten alarm podnoszę razem z wami.
The United States and Britain warned their citizens on Monday to avoid hotels in Afghanistan, days after dozens were killed at a mosque in an attack claimed by the Islamic State group. U.S. citizens who are at or near the Serena Hotel should leave immediately. That according to the U.S. Department, citing security threats in the area. In light of the increased risks, you are advised not to stay in hotels, particularly in Kabul, such as the Serena Hotel, that according to Britain's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Since the Taliban takeover, many foreigners have left Afghanistan, but some journalists and aid workers remain in the capital. The well-known Serena, a luxury hotel popular with business travelers and foreign guests, has twice been the target of attacks by the Taliban. The Taliban, which seized power in August and declared an Islamic emirate, are seeking international recognition and assistance to avoid a humanitarian disaster and ease Afghanistan economic crisis. But as the hardline Islamist group transitions from a rebel army to a governing power, they are struggling to contain the threat from the Afghanistan chapter of ISIS. The lights are back on and power is restored in Lebanon today. The army supplied fuel to two key power stations that had run out. The country's two largest power plants shut down, plunging the whole country into darkness. The energy ministry says both plants ran out of fuel, causing the state electricity network to collapse completely for the second time this month. The Mediterranean country is battling economic turmoil, and the cash-strapped state has in recent months struggled to import enough fuel oil for electricity production. Lebanon has witnessed rolling power cuts across the country since the end of its 1975 to 1990 civil war, but the economic crisis has made matters drastically worse. Lebanese who can afford it subscribe to private generators to keep appliances on, but even their own owners have started to ration power supplies due to the scarcity of fuel. In other news, inside a huge crater in Israel's Negev Desert, a team wearing spacesuits ventures forth on a mission to simulate conditions on Mars. The Austrian Space Forum has set up a pretend Martian base with the Israeli Space Agency at Makdash Ramon, a 500-meter deep, 40-kilometer or 25-mile wide crater. Take a look.
We have researchers from 25 nations gathering here to simulate the first human mission on Mars. So we have a carefully selected crew of 6 analog astronauts from various countries who are mimicking the first steps of our society on the red planet. So for 1 month, Israel will be at the center stage of human spaceflight research for human Mars missions, because I firmly believe the very first human to walk on Mars is already born, and we are the shipbuilders enabling this journey. The Makdash Ramon is an almost unique geological structure in the world. And what we found here after many thousands of kilometers of scouting is that the Makdash Ramon has a lot of geological features which have twins on Mars. So we are actually testing material to the extreme, and we will see things breaking. But this is exactly the purpose why we're here, because every mistake we make here, every risk we take here, every material failing here is something where we learn. And when we make a mistake here, we can get better. And once we go to Mars, we don't make that mistake anymore.
The 6 so-called analog astronauts will live in isolation in the virtual station until the end of the month, The participants from Austria, Germany, Israel, the Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain all had to pass grueling physical and psychological tests. During their mission, they will conduct tests, including on a drone prototype that functions without GPS and on automated wind and solar-powered mapping vehicles. The mission will also aim to study human behavior and the effect of isolation on the astronauts. The Austrian Space Forum, a private organization made up of aerospace specialists, has already organized 12 missions, the most recent in Oman in 2018. The Israel project is part of the mission Ahmadi 20, which was expected to kick off last year but was delayed due to the pandemic. The forum has partnered with Israeli Research Center DMARS to construct the solar-powered base. NASA envisions the first human mission to Mars will launch in 2030.
World oil prices halted Monday to fresh multi-year pinnacles on strong demand and tight supplies, sparking inflation news and weighing on those stock markets. Now, London Brent goes up to a 3-year high at 84.30 per barrel, while New York's high crude left recent decision by OPEC and other major producers not to ramp up output has further strained global supplies. Oil will also be boosted last week by record-breaking natural gas prices, but these have eased after recent comments from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Gas had spiked last week on rebounding demand from reopening economies ahead of the peak demand Northern Hemisphere winter. That has persuaded some consumers to switch from gas to crude oil.
To mark the release of the manga Kaiju number 8, the Japanese publisher pulls no punches with a gigantic illustration of the comic book hero stuck on the facade of the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Take a look.
Ouais. Du coup, je suis rentré.
Je me souviens plus du nom, Yacine, je crois. Ouais. Kaiju numéro 8, c'est la nouvelle bombe du shonen manga. Au Japon, ça fonctionne très très bien. En France, c'est parti pour avoir le même objectif.
Blood donation drives have been part of the social outreach activities of the Iglesia ni Cristo or Church of Christ. In Taiwan, the Church of Christ sponsored a blood donation drive. Here's Rex Racoma for the report. Rex.
Blood donations are more necessary than ever during the current COVID-19 pandemic. Iglesia ni Cristo or Church of Christ in Taiwan, sponsored by the Buklod organization, are currently conducting a blood donation activity, teaming up with Hsinchu Foundation Blood Donation Center here in Hsinchu, Taiwan. Abiding by the government health protocol and following the safety guidelines, they were screened first before blood was collected from them. Donors were glad to be part of this activity, which will benefit both community and their own health.
Ang kahalagahan po ng pagsasagawa ng blood donation activity ay naisa sa katuparan po natin ang mga aral na ating tinanggap na sa lahat ng pagkakataon na makagagawa tayo ng mabuti, ay tutulong at tutulong ang mga kaanib sa Iglesia ni Cristo. Ito po ang ating layunin at nawa ay marami pa pong mga tao ang mahinabang sa ganitong ginagawang pagtulong at aktibidad sa Iglesia ni Cristo.
Una-una, masaya dahil nakadalo po kami sa mga ganitong klaseng aktibidad. Unang-una, na makatulong po tayo sa ating kapwa-tao. Sa pagkakataon din po na ito, nakikita po natin ang ating ibang kapatid sa ibang lokal. Talaga pong masasabi natin na maliit lamang po ang so we are in the small world lang po talaga.
很高兴来参加这个活动，这个捐血对我们自己本身身体非常的好，而且它能促进我们血液一个循环的一个换血，一个有点像换血一个动作，所以对我们身体非常的棒。来，我们所捐的血也对这个社会有所益处，需要给我们那个需要多换到血的一些病人所使用，让我们尽到我们自己一份的爱心，然后也给我们一个社会多带个起头的作用，大家都来捐血，然后我希望都捐血。所以谢谢这个教会办这个活动非常棒，非常的好，好谢谢。
Ako po ay nagagalak sapagkat sa araw po na ito, sinagawa po sa aming distrito ang blood donation drive. Bagamat sa pagnanais ko na makapag-donate ng dugo ay hindi po talaga nagamit yung dugong kinuha sa akin para sa donation purpose. Siguro po ito ay sa mga other purpose pa po. Pero masaya pa rin po ako at natutuwa sapagkat nakipagkaisa po ako sa banal na gawain ito ng banal na iglesia. This is Rex Racoma, reporting from BBC News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you,
And
Rex.
that's it. Thank you. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. Enjoy the rest of the week. We will return tomorrow.
And before we go, CJ would like to greet Brother GP Santos a very happy birthday. Happy birthday po.
Happy birthday.
There you go. And at the end of the day, as I always say, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles and we live in interesting times.